The fear of exposure. How does one overcome that?
The fear of exposure is huge because family systems depends on the culture you come from, the ethnic group you come from. Most of them have it in common that you have the family culture and you have your public culture. You have your family image, your public image, and your private image in the family. And you most certainly are not going to go out there and tell everybody what's going on at home, because there could be a lot of secrets that you keep, and sometimes there's a great deal of fear of exposure. That's on a general level, but on the individual level, most of us are afraid of exposure because, again, we're afraid people might not like us if they find out who we really are. If we don't feel good about ourselves, we're afraid of being exposed and show up who we really are, or the false belief of who we really are.
Does exposure, can that be a good thing? Because you may not want your business side to show itself on the personal side.
Well, you're talking about boundaries, not exposure. They're about having healthy boundaries between your personal life and your business life. That's just respect. And that's about respecting your colleagues in business and your personal life at home. And oftentimes you don't have those lines crossed.
So where do people draw the line between quote unquote secrets and exposure?
They draw the line of the secrets are not healthy. You could grow up in an alcoholic home, but you don't want to have anybody know that your mother or father is an alcoholic. That's a secret. Or any kind of abuse is going on. Mental, emotional, physical, or sexual abuse that's going on in the family. You don't want that. You might have a fear of that exposure because that brings a lot of judgment and rejection. So there's a fear of exposure there, which doesn't help your whole overall health in terms of all of these fears. Some of those are very real fears because you don't know what's going to happen if you're exposed.
And you don't know how people are going to take or respond to your situation as well.
Most of the times you have no idea, but you do know that there may be a big reaction to it. And that brings up all your fears. Your fear of a failure, abandonment, exposure, rejection. It brings them all up when you're keeping secrets and afraid of exposure. The exposure could have to do with also that you're not as knowledgeable as you thought you were. You led people to believe you were about certain things or certain subjects, say, that you think you're very smart at, and if you're exposed to it or tested on, you're not.
So what does one do to overcome the fear of exposure?
Well, one has to look very closely at it because you have to look at, does the fear exist there for you? Not everybody walks around with a fear of exposure. But if one does, then you have to take inventory. What are you really afraid of people discovering about you? And then you'll find out if you have fear of exposure.
And that differs from you wanting people to know about you. Is that correct?
Of course it's different. If you want people to know about you, you're going to sit down and talk to them and let them know you.
Right.
That's very different than keeping secrets to yourself about who you are. Think about it. Keeping secrets to yourself about who you are. That has to bring up fear because you're afraid of something.
How does one keep secrets about themselves?
Well, some people might be afraid of their sexuality. Some people might be afraid of their private life, that somebody finds out about it. Some people might be afraid of certain jobs that they do, like if you're an exotic dancer and you don't tell anybody about it. That's fear of exposure there. There's living with same gender partner, that can be definitely exposure there and afraid of being discovered. There's a lot of things that has to do with people's lifestyles that they're afraid of the exposure.
But that's somewhat healthy, isn't it? I mean, people tend to, let's say, if you happen to be someone who likes the same sex, that's not generally accepted.
In this day and age, it's legal and it's generally accepted. Most people have not gotten enough confidence in themselves to be who they are because of early life rejection about who they hang out with or who they do things with and who they live with. That goes across the board for ethnic groups, color, sexuality, gender identification, transgender identification. That brings up a lot of fears of exposure because people have not worked enough on themselves to be comfortable with who they are. And if you happen to be in that situation, I would strongly suggest to get help so that you can be a happier being with who you are, whoever you share your life with, and overcome that fear of exposure. Because somewhere along the line, when you have any of those fears, something will happen to force you to face them. And it's better if you're in charge of that rather than something else being in charge.